Welcome to this live. I'm really excited about this one. So it's been said that no conversation has the power to change a relationship, a business, a career, but any conversation can. Now, I paraphrase that by Susan Scott, author of Fierce Conversations, but it's true. And I want to talk about one conversation that most people hate, and that is giving feedback. And I'm taking a different angle on it this time, just based on what's in the atmosphere. So my clients have been coming to me in the past few weeks asking, Denise, so I have somebody on my team who reports to me, or I have a boss that I report to, and I need to say something. He did something, he said something, he's doing something, and I need to say something, but I don't want to damage the relationship, and I don't want it to backfire on me. And they have a really good point, because most people don't like giving feedback. I think even more people don't like receiving feedback. And this conversation can make or break your career, and it can make and break a relationship. So let's talk about best practices, do's and don'ts. And of course, I'm going to be making some generalizations here about people, but I will try and qualify that when I can. If you have a question or a comment, you can put it in the chat. But here's the thing. Men and women are different. They care about different things, and they care about a lot of the same things. But in my 20 years of coaching, and before that, being a trainer in leadership and influence, I know a few things about the landmines not to step on. And I personally am a person who really doesn't like to receive corrective feedback, but you wouldn't know that about me necessarily. Now, when I'm in a good relationship with somebody, yeah, it might hurt in the beginning, might get a little trigger to my ego, but then I love it. I love it. But that's just me. So we all have natural triggers around feedback. I don't know. I mean, if I'm doing a speech and there's 100 people in there and I ask who loves to receive feedback, maybe 2 people raise their hands. So it's not the norm. And so here are a few things. You can't give somebody feedback if you don't have a quality relationship with them already. Just think about this. Think about somebody who has given you feedback in your life whom you do not have a quality relationship with. What do? Well, you go and talk to a buddy that you do have a quality relationship with, and you say, do you know what my boss just told me? And then you tell them, and then they say, what? Pfft, ignore that. That's not you. Because you have a relationship with that person, you're going to hear that person. So the same goes for you at work. Now, I know this is uncomfortable because what if you manage somebody? Well, it is tricky, but what I recommend is build the relationship first. Very early on in your relationship with anybody you work with, if they're a stakeholder, a boss, a direct report, you need to build a relationship. And how do we do that? We have conversations where we are curious and we genuinely want to learn about that person. And then we ask open-ended questions like, where are you from? What's the best job you ever had? What was great about it? What kind of praise lands for you? What kind of praise bounces right off or insults you? What's the best way to receive feedback? Then you'll get all these clues about this person, their identity, and how they want to be seen in the world, and how you can best approach them. We all have our own unique context, and the only way you can figure it out is by observation or questions. Questions are much, much faster and more accurate than observations. Sure, you can observe what somebody complains about. What they complain about in others might be the thing that they don't want to look at in themselves, the thing that really bothers them. So, of course, you wouldn't want to give them feedback about that thing unless you have a very good approach. All right, so let's talk about, I'm just going to look at some of my notes. So you have to build the relationship, but then you also have to build your own mindset about it. So let's say you come to the conversation and you're nervous. Like, oh God, what's this guy going to say? What's he going to do? The person you're giving feedback to can feel your nervousness. And what do you think is going to happen to them? They're going to get nervous too. Now everybody's on edge. Everybody is dumping cortisol into their bodies. Everybody's on guard, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it's not going to be a calm, curious, comfortable conversation. So what do you have to do? Before you even get into this conversation, if you've decided to have it because you do have a relationship, you have to get in a mindset that it's going to be great. Seriously, you have to get in a mindset that you are the person that gets to help this person, improve something, see something that nobody else has the courage to show them. You get to give them a gift that if they choose to accept it, will help their career. All right, so now we've got relationship, we've got the mindset of giving and helping. Now we need some tactics. So I want to talk a little bit about why men and women are a little different with this. So let's face it. It hasn't been that long where women have had a seat at the table. So women for millennia were measured on how well they nurtured. Men for millennia have been measured on how well they provided. I once read Brene Brown when she talked about how she was giving this big talk, and she was talking about her research on shame and vulnerability. Shame is the worst, heaviest emotion we can experience, and it is the emotion of not being good enough. Something is wrong with you. And we will do anything to try and avoid feeling the shame. But most people, and the people who misbehave the most, are walking around with a heavy dose of it. And that misbehavior can show up as self-sabotage, which is most of the people I work with. Self-sabotage in the form of playing small. Those tend to be women. In men, it can show up as self-sabotage in the form of being too big, overcompensating. So Brene Brown talked about how one man came up at the end of her talk and said, "Where's the research on men?" And she said, "What do you mean?" He said, "All your examples are women." And it hit her. Oh my God. Why don't I understand why haven't I researched the differences? There might be differences between men and women and shame. And I will never forget, she said, after she researched this, she said, basically, if you want to insult a woman, tell her she's ugly and a bad mother. And if you want to insult a man, tell him he's not successful. Or in other words, not good at their job. So all human beings have fears. And social scientists, neuroscientists bucket them into three. I call them FOPO, fear of pissing somebody off. FOMO, fear of messing up or not measuring up. And then FOGA, fear of getting off your ass. That's the change one. So what do you do with this feedback? Well, you have to change something. Nobody wants to change anything. That takes too much energy. But let's go back to FOPO, fear of pissing somebody off. Women tend to have FOPO, fear of pissing somebody off, more than men. And women fear pissing off anybody. The janitor, the cleaning lady, the person who waters the plants. They don't want to offend. For the most part, I know this is a generalization. Please don't send me hate mail. Men may also not want to piss people off, but it tends to be the senior level people that men don't want to piss off. And they are more willing to piss off the subordinates, the people that don't sign the paychecks and don't give the promotions. And it's just because of, I know I'm generalizing here, but it is because of the way we have been trained for our roles and what we're up to in the world and what we get rewarded for. And if a woman pissed off the wrong person and was kicked out of the tribe or isolated, she wouldn't live. And men, even in the animal species, have to fight each other. It's a competitive nature. Okay, so we've got this going on in the workplace, these tribal fears going on in the workplace. And now we see a lot of women rising in the workforce because they're amazing at what they do and being in a position of leading men. And about half of the women that I work with are non-Caucasian. Many are immigrants to North America or the United States. And many have an accent. Many have more melanin in their skin than a lot of the people they're managing. And so immediately there is something that's going to antagonize the ability to create relationship, and that is bias, that is differences. Differences, visible auditory differences, somebody with an accent, even in the US, somebody with a different accent regionally can create a bias. So now we have to overcome that. So before you ever give somebody feedback, please, back to square one, build relationship. And the way you can do this, and I've got another podcast on this, the way you can do this is by asking great questions and waiting, listening at what I call scuba level. That is this deep presence where you are fully aware of all the nuances, the body language, and you're quiet, creating spaces, asking follow-up questions like, say more about that. What was great about that? What did you most hate about that? That's scuba level listening. And when you listen to somebody like that, you are building relationship with them. And then once you hear something you have in common, it can be anything. You have kids, you both grew up in a small town, you both like the color blue, that's probably not a good one. You both have pets, whatever it is. Then you send information across about you. And you only send information across that you have in common. And you will find things that you have in common. All right, so this is a situation that I see quite often, and it is dicey. So let's assume for a moment that you do have relationship. This person respects you. Let me give you a story. Now you have to have a good strategy. And I give all my people this 5-step instruction to fill out their opening statement, craft it out, send it to me, and I'm going to edit it. And the reason I edit it for my clients is because the first time they fill it out, they're confused, they're emotional, and if they say what they put on there in their first draft, it is not going to go well. Let me give you an example. So my client, Kim, she was leading a huge organization, and it was very, very stressful times. Many people had quit. The people who were there were completely fried and overworked. And the big boss came to the floor, and didn't like what he saw. And he immediately started to criticize people. This is a very senior leader. It was her skip level leader. And he just started to criticize people, and she could just watch the morale go down. And she was so upset, so angry. They were all working so hard. I mean, ridiculous 12-hour days. And she was worried that not only would morale drop more, but more people would quit. And how on earth were they going to do their jobs? She was fuming. She filled out the template. She sent it to me, and I said, please don't say any of this. I could feel the anger in her words. So the first thing she had to do was get curious. What might he be suffering from? What might he be afraid of? What would cause this person to come and do such a dumb strategic move? Such an emotional move. Clearly he's a smart person, but this was not smart action. And she sat back and she said, oh my God. Oh yeah, our numbers are terrible. He's on the hook for him. He's got to go report to the CEO. And she had empathy for him. And she believed that he did not want to be a terrible, demotivating leader. Now imagine her mindset in that place versus the, oh my God, you're such a, fill in the blank. How could you do this? It's completely different. Now, in this dispassionate, curious, empathetic way, I asked her, does he respect you? She's like, oh yeah, he just gave me a promotion. I said, all right, you're going to be the one. You're going to be the one to deliver this. And she did. 6 months later, she had another promotion. And he was very, very grateful. So they didn't necessarily have a relationship, the kind of like relationship where they're going to talk outside work, but they had a relationship of rapport and respect. And because she came to him with empathy, it all worked out. So let me tell you a little bit about this, how we're going to do this. Once you know what somebody likes to be known for, what they care about, what their triggers are, now you can craft your message. So let's see, I want to tell you about, okay. First of all, step one. I know I've said the word feedback many, many times in this. I don't want you to say feedback ever in this conversation. The word is a trigger word. You can have this conversation without ever saying the word feedback. You can just say, hey, I'd love to have a conversation. I'd love to have a little talk about the other day when you came to the office, when you came to the floor. Is this a good time? And why would I ask if this is a good time? Well, because if it's not, if they have to go run to the dentist and they don't have enough time to pay attention to you, you don't want to have this conversation. So you want to also give them some autonomy in this conversation. And then notice how I said, can we talk about blank? And I just named a situation. I didn't name anything that happened, any emotions I'm feeling. I didn't put any adverbs or adjectives in there. I want to talk to you the other day about when you were very pissed off and you criticized the team. No, just be neutral. It was just a situation. I want to talk to you about that meeting we were just in. I want to talk to you about something I noticed. The phrase I noticed says, it's just something I noticed. It's an observation. It's not factual. It's just something I noticed. Maybe others noticed it, maybe they didn't. Right? See how all these things create psychological safety. If someone does not have psychological safety in this conversation, if they are feeling attacked, they're not going to absorb and let in what you say, and it will damage your relationship. All right. Now, there may be a million things they did that pissed you off. I want you to name no more than 2. And again, I want you to be objective, irrefutable. Instead of saying, hey, you yelled at the team, or you interrupted the customer, or you were rude to the customer. You would say something like, well, you went up to Sally and said, I don't know what he said. You would quote, like, this sucks. What are you thinking? You would quote verbatim what was said. No, you really said that. Other people heard it too. Really? I said that? Okay, so you're describing no more than 2 things. Pick the 2 best ones, because you're not going to add any more in this conversation, or else it's going to feel like an attack. Like, how many more do you have to tell me about? All right, and then you're going to assume good intent. And I want you to be honest about this. I never want you to lie. And this can be hard if you have a lot of emotion about somebody, if you're really upset about something somebody said or did. You have to find what the good intent is. And I will tell you one that's always there. Nobody wants to be a jackass when they wake up in the morning. Nobody wakes up in the morning saying, I am really going to screw up my career. Everybody wants to be successful. So if you can't find anything else, you can say, I am assuming. You can even say, I know. I don't usually like you to say, I know, because we can't assume we know things about people. But you can say, I know, when you're assuming something positive. I know you want to be a good leader. I know there's a good leader inside you. I've seen you be a good leader. So I'm curious, what was going on that day? What was going on for you? That's how you end it. That's how you end your opening statement, is with a true invitation that begins with what? What is probably the best one? You can even use a statement like, tell me what's going on for you. Tell me what stress you're under. Tell me what you're thinking. And you genuinely hand it over to them. Now, I want you to allow them to be triggered. I want you to allow them to be scared or annoyed or whatever emotion they have. And if you are a younger woman, a younger minority woman who is giving this feedback, just expect it's not personal. There is a tribal trigger going on in their brain that is triggering shame. And it might look like anger, but it's this fear of not being good enough. And it might get projected back at you in a how dare you kind of move. But if you truly have a relationship and you are truly caring and respectful and curious, you will take a breath. You will tell yourself this isn't personal. This is somebody who's afraid for their career and their reputation, and I'm here to help. And then you'll ask a question again. Say more about what's going on for you. I want to help. Now, if you know a little bit about this person's personality, it will make it easier for you to name the thing and protect the thing that they most care about. So let me tell you a little bit about personality types. Again, we're going to generalize, and you can't know a personality type by looking at them. But when you ask questions to build relationship, you can find out what their triggers are. So I'm just going to use the Enneagram Profile, and I'll explain that. But it's a really great way. The Enneagram is an assessment I use because unlike most of the assessments that tell you how you operate in the world, it tells you why you operate that way. What's your core fear? What's your core need? And in the workplace, most people in America and in the corporate world in general, the most common type is 3s, the competitive achiever, especially in men. Most men in corporate America are either 3s, the competitive achiever, where all they care, the thing they care about most is being successful, shining brighter than others. So if they don't get a raise, if they get a demotion, if they get a boss who's younger than them, all of these things are threats to their identity and security. So you will want to do everything you can to protect their sense of being successful. How can you help them with this feedback be more successful? And how can you help them see that you want them to be successful and that they are successful in certain realms? The other common types are 8s, the active controller. 8s just don't want to be told what to do. And they're trying to fix things. They're bulls in a china shop, but they're trying to fix things for the good of all. They just don't do it very gracefully. So if you tell an 8 they weren't nice, they probably aren't going to care. But if you tell an 8, hey, what you did was amazing, but I'm afraid nobody's going to come along and we're not going to be able to execute because everybody just got really pissed off and offended. So it's less about the fear of pissing somebody off than it is the fear of being able to execute on the challenge. 8s tend to go faster than everybody else can go because they just want to get from A to Z quickly without patting heads and giving hugs and things like that. The other common one is the 7, the enthusiastic visionary. 7s are very big picture. They tend to be the highest levels in the organizations, and most of them are men, CEOs, strategists. And 7s don't want to feel pain. So 7s, you won't have to say much for them to realize what you're talking about. And you won't have to give them a ton of details. And they are not going to want to hear it and want to sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's fine. No, yeah, I can do that. Now, there are also a lot of women, 3s, the competitive achiever in the organization. But in my experience, they tend to be the subtype that doesn't want to shine. They want to be number 2. They want to be the supporting hero. They want to be behind the scenes. They want to be successful, but they also want to lift their teams up. Now, there are women 3s who are the more common masculine type that just want to succeed. It's just not as common. So if you know that, like the best praise somebody tells you they ever got was because their team felt successful, then they're probably 3 that cares about others. So fear of pissing somebody off would be relevant here, as well as fear of measuring up. If they tell you about a time when they were successful because they got the blue ribbon, they got the promotion, and they don't mention their team, they're probably just the standalone 3 that wants to be successful and shine. This gives you clues about how to protect their ego. Now, you don't have to do this. You can just give the feedback and blurt it out. But if you don't protect somebody's ego, it is very rare that the feedback is going to land, and mostly it's going to come back in your face. So let's say you don't have a relationship and you decide not to have the conversation. Is it over? Maybe not. You can think about who does have a relationship with this and who can I consult that person confidentially and share with them my concerns, and that it's in their best interest and that I want to someday have this conversation with them, but I don't think they will receive it well from me. So that would be influencing around second degree feedback, where you have somebody else who can say, preferably that they saw it, or that they've heard about it from multiple people, or that person, you can put that person on notice to just start watching and seeing if they see it, and then give the feedback when they notice it and when it's appropriate. Other than that, the best you can do is be curious and say, hey, I'm curious about what your approach was in that meeting we were just in. And you just ask questions. Sometimes just the person answering your open-ended questions, what was your approach with the customer when you were asking them all those questions? Or when you didn't ask them any questions and you just started talking about the product? Well, if you're genuinely curious, they will not be triggered and they will actually start to think about it and talk about it. And if they're a 9 on the Enneagram, like me, they will end up giving themselves the feedback. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Oh, I could have done that better. 9s, the peaceful harmonizers. Yes, it sounds really nice and warm and fuzzy, and we are, but we also don't like to be controlled. And we really don't like getting feedback. But when you give a 9 feedback, you do want to appeal to their heart, to the person in them who wants to create harmony in the world. 9s don't want to piss people off, but sometimes they do because they have passive aggressive behavior, because they think people can't handle conflict and they don't like conflict. So this would be really good to know. And there are quite a few 9s in the organizations. So these are the peaceful harmonizers. If you have somebody in your organization who's passive aggressive, who never gives you conflict, but kind of just like says one thing, but does another, it's not because they're a bad person. It's because they're trying to create harmony, and they think if they tell you the truth, if they give you the feedback, that will create disharmony. So for that person, you can be gentle, and you can even be a little passive, a little nuanced. You don't have to say it directly, and they will figure it out just by asking them questions. When I ask my people by different types, I had a 7 in the group just recently, and I asked her how she liked to receive feedback, and she said, I want you to say the good thing, the bad thing, and then the good thing. Most of us, that would just piss us off. I call it a crap sandwich. But for her, the 7, she loved it. Like, I want to hear a good, and then a bad, and then a good. But that is not a practice you want to use with everybody. With other people, it can be insulting. So again, don't guess. Just ask people when you first meet them, before you ever need to give them feedback, what is some feedback that's landed for you in the past that you really like? How do you like to hear it? And if they say, no, I don't like to hear it at all, that's when you got to respect that. And until you have great relationship, you don't give it to them. You just ask good questions about their intent and their technique, and they'll figure it out on their own. All right. So I think that's all I wanted to say about feedback. Somebody's probably going to ask me about, well, what if I have a narcissist boss? It's a whole different situation, right? But I do want to tell you, this stuff works. This is last night. Last night I got a text. I just said, hey, I wanted you to know the conversation with blank was much better than I expected. This was an I'm about to fire somebody conversation. And she said it was honest, open, and although he was a bit defensive at the beginning, was genuinely concerned and willing to work on it. Okay, more. I don't want to give away too much. And then thanks again for your support. Time will tell, but you really helped me focus the conversation and present the facts calmly and clearly. You have to get focused before you go into this conversation, or you are going to be scattered and you're going to make it worse. So get clear. If you want some tools to help you, go to my website, work-lifebrilliance.com. It's work-lifebrilliance.com with a dash between work and life. And in the top section where you see my picture, you'll see 2 buttons. One will take you, they're orange and red, and one will take you to a masterclass that will show you the 5 shifts you have to make if you're a female professional who wants to go from self-sabotage to success, to calm, confident success. So it's 45 minutes, it's free. And then there's a ton of free resources on the website, work-lifebrilliance.com. I'm excited for you to learn how to do this and become fearless. Become fearless when it comes to giving these, and actually go from, like I was, panicking before these kind of conversations, dreading these conversations, to now I feel like I'm handing somebody a big, giant gift. I freaking love giving feedback. And of course, I never say the word feedback when I'm doing it. All right. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know. You can find me on LinkedIn, Denise R. Green, and all over the place. You'll see on my website how to connect with me. All right. Have a great day.